Ready to go deeper into the world of databases?
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
You brought some really interesting resources this time. Portuguese databases, even some diagrams. Looks like we're covering it all. Computer files to choosing the right database system for real-world projects.
It's going to be a fascinating journey, that's for sure.
By the end, listeners will be navigating the world of databases like pros, wowing their colleagues with all their new knowledge. And where better to start than with Chapter 1, Understanding Databases from Spreadsheets.
It's the perfect foundation. Just like building a house, you can't start with the roof.
Right. Chapter 1 starts with something I bet everyone sees every day but never really thinks about. Computer files. We've got .exe for programs, JPG for images.
Metadata in action.
Those little extensions, they're metadata.
Absolutely. They're like labels, providing info about the file, what's in it, what it's for. Databases do the same thing, but on a massive scale. Makes searching, retrieving, analyzing data so much easier. Imagine those old library catalog cards, but for your whole digital life.
So instead of endless stacks of paper, we have these super organized databases.
Exactly.
And speaking of organization, Chapter 1 also digs into spreadsheets, data files, and databases. We use spreadsheets like Excel all the time, crunching numbers, organizing information.
Great for smaller tasks. Think of it like your toolbox at home, perfect for small projects.
But when you need to build a skyscraper,
You need a more specialized, robust system. That's where databases come in. They provide structure, efficiency, can handle massive amounts of data.
so Excel for the grocery list, databases for tracking millions of transactions.
Precisely. And in Chapter 2, we get introduced to a tool built for exactly that, Microsoft Access. We'll see the power of databases in action, starting with those specialized stations you mentioned, tables.
And these tables, they're not just about rows and columns, are they? They handle specific types of data.
Exactly. In Access, you define the data type. For each column ensures data integrity and consistency. Seems like a small detail, but it's crucial for accurate, reliable information. Imagine a business storing customer phone numbers as text instead of numbers. Chaos.
Talk about a headache.
Right.
And speaking of user-friendly,
Right.
Chapter 2 talks about forms, a more approachable way to interact with data than staring at endless rows and columns.
Absolutely. Forms make data entry intuitive, user-friendly. But here's where things get really interesting. Chapter 2 gives us a taste of SQL, the language of databases.
We get to see the code behind the scenes.
Exactly. And while it might look intimidating at first, SQL is actually quite elegant in its logic and capabilities. We can use it to ask the database specific questions, retrieve the exact data we need, even manipulate data in powerful ways.
Powerful stuff. So we've built our database, got our tables and forms all set up, even know a little SQL, but we can't just dump data in there and hope for the best, right? That's where Chapter 3 data modeling comes in. And this is where things get a little more complex.
You're not wrong. Having a database isn't enough. Imagine a library with no organization. You might have amazing books, but good luck finding them. Data modeling brings order to the chaos. It's about making sure our database is structured in a way that makes sense, is easy to navigate.
So it's more than just making it look neat. There's a real strategy involved.
Absolutely. Chapter 3 digs into data normalization.
Catchy term.
Right. Basically, it means we want to eliminate redundancy, ensure data integrity. Imagine you're running a business, you're storing customer information. You wouldn't want to type in their address every single time they make a purchase, right?
Oh, that would be a nightmare. Typos, inconsistencies.
Yeah.
Talk about inefficient.
Exactly. Data normalization helps us avoid all that. It's about breaking down information into logical tables, establishing relationships between them. So we organize data efficiently. Each piece of information has its designated place.
Instead of a junk drawer, we have a well-organized filing cabinet.
I like that analogy. And to help visualize those relationships, Chapter 3 introduces us to entity relationship diagrams, ERDs.
ERDs. Those sound familiar. Aren't those the diagrams you see on crime shows, mapping out relationships between suspects?
You got it. But instead of tracking down criminals, we're mapping out connections between customers, products, salespeople, any relevant entity in our database.
So we can visually see how everything's connected.
Yeah.
Sounds way more intuitive than just looking at lines of code.
Absolutely. ERDs are powerful tools for database design. They provide a clear blueprint, bridge the gap between abstract concepts and practical implementation. And that's where the logical data model comes in.
Okay, so we go from this visual map to an actual plan for building our database.
Precisely. We take the insights from our ERD, use them to create a logical data model. This blueprint takes into account the specific limitations, strengths of different database systems, like choosing the right building materials based on the environment, design of a building.
Makes sense. You wouldn't use straw to build a skyscraper. Speaking of skyscrapers, Chapter 4 takes us beyond those relational databases we've been talking about, introduces us to DBMS database management systems. We've talked about building a database, but who's managing the whole operation? Is it like having an architect who designed the building and then hands it off to a construction crew?
Great analogy. The DBMS is our construction crew. It's the software that lets us interact with the database, run those SQL queries, manage security, keep everything running smoothly.
And I'm guessing the DBA, the database administrator, is the one overseeing the construction site.
You got it. The DBA is like the conductor of an orchestra. They make sure all the different parts are working together in harmony.
Making sure all the SQL queries are hitting the right notes.
Precisely. Now, remember those cutting-edge NoSQL databases you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, how could I forget?
Well, they fit in perfectly here. We talked about relational databases being like well-organized filing cabinets. But sometimes you need something more flexible, especially when you're dealing with huge amounts of data that don't fit neatly into rows and columns.
Like trying to fit a giant octopus into that organized filing cabinet? Not going to happen.
Exactly. That's where NoSQL databases shine. They offer a more adaptable approach, perfect for massive data sets, the kind used by companies like Google and Amazon.
So relational databases for structured data, NoSQL for those massive, constantly changing data sets that power things like social media or online shopping recommendations.
You got it. It's all about choosing the right tool for the job. And as you delve deeper into databases, you'll find a whole universe of models out there, each with its own strengths and weaknesses.
Wow, a whole universe. Who knew there was so much to databases? We've covered a lot of ground, from those simple file extensions to those complex diagrams. It's amazing how it all connects.
It really is. It's all about information, how we organize it, how we make sense of it. And in our increasingly digital world, all this data, understanding these concepts is only going to become more important.
You've given us a lot to think about. I'm already starting to see databases everywhere I look. The way my phone organizes contacts, those algorithms that recommend new music.
Yeah.
Even traffic apps.
Exactly. They're not just confined to labs or tech companies anymore. Databases are part of everyday life now.
It's kind of mind-blowing and a little empowering, I have to say. Thanks to this deep dive, I feel like I can actually understand these systems, think about how they work.
That's the goal. Keep asking questions, keep exploring. Who knows what other hidden connections you'll find.
I'm definitely inspired to keep digging. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of databases. Until next time, everyone, keep those queries coming.
Farewell and happy data exploring.